All right. First thing I want to do is welcome everyone to tonight's brand new wildlife webinar. It's called Spirit Bears. We're going to be talking a little bit more than just spirit bears, and we'll get into what those are. But we will talk about a few other amazing color morphs or just different colors that black bears come in. But by and large, I think spirit bears kind of capture the attention of most people. And I think we could easily spend an hour talking about these guys. Most of you know who I am, or I'm sure all of you know who I am. I'm Daryl Radijak, wildlife biologist, bear specialist, large carnivore guy. I do most of these webinars. I do have a couple of folks come in and help me every once in a while, but I'm going to be with you tonight, and hopefully you will learn all there is to know about spirit bears. Before I get into tonight's presentation, though, I put that red arrow in on this title slide because I got to tell you, this presentation I was a little bit worried about because I personally wanted to teach. I wanted to learn as much as I could about spirit bears, which you'll come to know they're in a very, very small portion of North America is where we find all of these spirit bears. And I was thinking, how in the world am I going to get photographs? Because I have to get permission to use photographs that I put in my slide presentations. And I've got wonderful photographers, especially in the East around the Smokies, that give me all these amazing photographs. But who here or who in Tennessee had the opportunity to go and film or photograph spirit bears, which are on the coast of British Columbia? And I sent an email to a gentleman named Ian McAllister. If you don't know him, you should. If you've ever heard of the film The Great Bear Rainforest, he is one of the leading photographers and the impetus for that film. It's an IMAX film. And he's got this organization called PacificWild.org. He wrote me back, said use whatever photographs I have. So I could not have done it without Ian McAllister. Huge shout out to him. So with that, I'm going to get started here and we will get underway. As usual, I got to give a little bit of background information about the instructors that are presenting the information. Again, I know most of you have heard this about 100 times, but my name is Daryl Radijak. I am a wildlife biologist. I'm a career wildlife guy. I received my degree in wildlife management from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. If you've never heard of that before, it's part of Syracuse University. Awesome, awesome school when it comes to wildlife and forestry. But that was way back in the early 90s when I did that. And then I started my career. My first break came when I was selected to be the manager of the Appalachian Bear Center, which is now known as the Appalachian Bear Rescue. I did that in the late 90s. That's where my passion for working with bears grew, and this love of teaching and reaching out to the public, because it was at that point I knew that I don't have to do much with the wildlife. I've got to do most of my work with the people. And so I think education is a passion of mine because I know it's the most effective thing for wildlife. So I worked at that bear center for about 5 years. And then I switched over and I took a job with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Because of my bear experience, I was promoted to the big game coordinator. So I was managing all the bear, all the deer, all the elk, all the wild hogs, all those big furry animals in Tennessee. Did that for about 7 years. And then the director saw something in me and promoted me to chief of wildlife for the state of Tennessee. So instead of being in charge of all the big, cool creatures, I was in charge of every creature in Tennessee, which was pretty awesome. Did that for about 5 years. And then I got an itch to pursue a boyhood dream to live and work out west. So about 4 years ago, I made the jump from Tennessee and I moved all the way to the Rocky Mountains, right at the southern tip of the Rocky Mountains in northern New Mexico, which you will find, and I will brag about it all the time. It is one of the most unbelievable places, not in North America, but in the entire world. The landscapes here are just absolutely phenomenal. So anyway, I've been doing a bunch of this wildlife education. I absolutely love it. In fact, we're doing quite well with some of the education programs we're doing out here. So with that, just know that everything I present to you on these Wildlife for You webinars is science-based. All the instructors that we bring in, they're teaching science. It's not opinion. It's not leading fed. It's not something that they learn because they stayed in a Holiday Inn. They're career wildlife biologists that are trying to do the best, not just by you, but by the wildlife that they serve. So sorry for that, but I think it's important for you to know. So here's how we're going to get started. I need you to type something. Okay, we're going to be talking about some spirit bears here, but before we get started, I want you to name an animal, or a mammal, not just an animal, but a mammal. So throw out some ideas of a mammal. And Catherine, I saw that you raised your hand. Did you have a question? Okay. Katie, I'm going to throw human out, and you'll understand why. But I see some of the things like puma and moose. I'm going to go back to dogs, but when you start thinking of a lot of mammals that are out there, another good one, elk, what you'll find out is that whenever you're dealing with any specific mammal, in most cases, whatever species you're dealing with, that animal is going to look exactly like it does from one part of the country to another part of the country. So, for example, a woodchuck or a bison or a deer, an antelope, any mammal species you think of, it doesn't matter if it's on the East Coast, West Coast, it's going to be the same coloration or the same fur pattern. Now, the one that is dancing around dogs, the canids are a little bit different, but for the most part, even when you're looking like at coyotes in the west to the east, still very similar with the gray modeling type of fur. But in almost every situation, if you're like, for example, looking at a bobcat on the East Coast looks like a bobcat on the West Coast, as it does with pretty much all of these mammals. And that is pretty much standard. That's one of the things that does break them out into being their own individual species is they all kind of look alike for the most part, especially with their fur coloring. Until you get to this guy right here. This, my friends, as you all know, is a black bear. And I think it's one of the coolest things. It's because of all the bear species. Most bear species, they all look alike with the same color, but the one that varies the most in the color is named the black bear. And so why they use the term black bear, I wish they chose something else there, because a black bear is one of those few types of mammals that can look very, very different in the coloration of their fur from one point of North America compared to another point of North America. And yes, Greg, dolphins primarily all look the same too. Believe it or not, I was going to put a picture of a marine mammal up there just in case someone threw that out. So you made me smile when I saw a dolphin there. So let's talk about black bears. And most of you know, if you've ever attended my Bears of the World webinar, there's a number of species of bears, 7 or 8 species of bears all over the world. But primarily here in North America, we have 3 species of bears. We have polar bears, we have brown bears, and we have black bears. And today we're only going to be talking about black bears. And so when you're looking at that individual species, the genus and species is Ursus americanus. And this map here, I love this map. I finally found a really, really good detailed range map of where black bears are found all throughout North America. And the first thing I wanted you to kind of take a good close look at is the historic range. The darker shade of red or light red is where black bears are currently found. But if you see that much lighter shade, that is pretty much in all the gaps in the Midwest, that is the historic range. And so you can see that black bears pretty much covered all of North America except for the far reaches of the Arctic. And then there's just small gaps in the southwestern portion, like the Baja of California, and then Southern California, and just little bits of Nevada and Arizona. But for the most part, black bears were found literally in every square inch of the United States, except a few of those southwestern portions. But nowadays, when you look at their current range, you see that they have been extirpated, which means they've been wiped out of many areas. And if you look at the map, it's mostly those Midwestern areas. And it's real easy to figure out why. When Eastern Europeans settled North America, I've mentioned this many times, we were really good at killing things that we didn't want to compete with. So we wiped out lots of animals, especially those apex predators, from cougars to wolves to bears. And what you'll see nowadays is the current black bear range. You see they hung on in these really heavily dense forested mountainous areas. So on the East Coast, you have bears that run up and down that Appalachian Mountains. Believe it or not, the range has expanded tremendously over the last 30 or 40 years. It was much, much smaller, much more isolated pockets than that. So black bears have been doing wonderful. Then you have some of those forested areas in Arkansas, in Missouri, the White Mountains, the Ouachita, and even down into Florida and Louisiana. So we got some dense swamps. We got those uninhabitable places for humans primarily. That's where the bears hung on, and that's where their stronghold was. And now they're coming back. Now that we have all these game protections, the bears are coming back. So this is the range of bears in North America. And so if you've listened to enough of my talks, the one thing that I don't like to get into, but I'm going to get into it on this presentation, is we're going to talk a little bit about subspecies. And I think subspecies is where you get to be splitting hairs a little too finely, because everything we're talking about today is a black bear. It's just one species, it's a black bear. But if you look at the eastern half of North America, where I just circled with the yellow, there are a number of subspecies. And generally the best way to think about subspecies and to consider subspecies is the geographic range of a particular species. And for some reason or another, we wanted to divide it out and say that there are these different subspecies, which is fine. And if you look at the eastern half of North America, the vast majority of black bears in the eastern half of North America, they are Ursus americanus, genus and species, and then so that's the UA, and then the Americanus is a subspecies. So in most of the eastern half of the United States, you have Ursus americanus americanus. It's the eastern black bear. And as you all know, many of you have seen them. In fact, like everyone has seen black bears in the east, especially around the Smokies, and they're doing really, really well on the East Coast compared to what they were doing about 100 years ago. And so everyone knows what a black bear looks like. They are black. Now, you all understand black can be a couple of different variations. Like the one on top is more of a shiny black, where the one on the bottom is more of a grayish black. But guess what? Its coat is still black. So the black bear name is very fitting for them. Now, believe it or not, even in the East Coast, there are multiple subspecies. So there's other species or subspecies. For example, the Florida black bear, which is down in the Everglades. You have the Louisiana black bear, obviously in Louisiana. Again, those subspecies tend to be all black. So that's what black bears are. Now, the cool thing is, and you'll see it all throughout the East, occasionally you get this bear, a black bear, that will have this white chest blaze. That's about the biggest color variation that you get with black bears in the eastern half of North America. Now, that white chest blaze is mostly prevalent in the Florida black bear, but it does happen all throughout the Smokies, and even further up north, you might get a black bear that has that white chest blaze. But for the most part, that species is a black species. Then things get really, really cool because we're going to flip sides of the continent. We're going to move out west. and we're going to talk about some of the western subspecies of black bears. Now, when you get into the Rocky Mountains, things get really cool because one of the dominant subspecies out there is Ursus americanus cinnamomum. And so obviously you've heard of a cinnamon black bear. It's still a black bear. It's Ursus americanus, but they can be cinnamon in color. Now I will tell you there's still a ton of western bears. In fact, probably most western bears will probably be black, but start getting to be lighter colors. Now, if you get down into the Southwest, where you have really dry, arid, intense sun, which do you think is more advantageous for a bear, to be a cinnamon color or a blonde color or black? Obviously, if you're going to be in a hot, arid environment, you don't want to be wearing a black fur coat. And so you tend to get a lot more lighter colorations in those western states, especially in the Southwest. And just like the East, there's all these different kinds of subspecies. Again, I hate belaboring the fact that they're subspecies because they're all black bears. But you have the New Mexico black bear, the Olympic black bear, California black bear. Again, all a subspecies is pretty much which geographic area is the species coming from. And for the most part, the differences are very, very subtle. You can't really tell much difference. But the cool thing is with Western black bears come in all sorts of lighter colors. You'll have the cinnamons, you'll have some black bears that are brown, you'll have black bears that are blonde, a mix. I've seen black bears here not too far from my house that were blonde, like blonde bodied, black arms. It was really cool. I thought it was a German Shepherd. But for the most part, you get a real hodgepodge of different colorations. And it's really neat about black bears in the in the western half of North America, because they do have this variety of colors. So that is pretty much what you see in the lower 50. Lower 50. That's pretty much what you see in the lower 48. I threw Alaska and Hawaii in the lower portion there. So East Coast, they're all black. West Coast, they come in a variety of colors, but mostly red, brown, blonde, or black. And then if you move further north and a little further west, we get into two subspecies, which we're going to spend the rest of the night talking about. One I'm just going to briefly mention, and then the other we'll definitely spend a long time talking about it. So what I circled there in this slide is southeastern Alaska. Can anyone tell me what bears we're going to talk about here? In fact, I will give you, well, it's Ursus americanus emonsii, and they're nicknamed the glacier black bear. And these are one of my coolest. In fact, I hold these right up there with the spirit bears because I think the coloration on these critters are absolutely phenomenal. If you've never seen them, that's not a good picture. I pulled that out. I think that picture shows you how well they blend into the rocks. But literally what these glacier bears are, there's a small population of black bears in southeastern Alaska, around the Glacier Bay area, that a very small percentage of them have this grayish or bluish gray coloration. So besides black bears coming in all those other forms of red and blonde and brown and black, you get these black bears that also come in the color blue or bluish gray, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. Again, you can't think of any other mammals that have such tremendous variation in their pelage than black bears, at least wild animals. I know dogs can be crazy, but those are domesticated, so they don't count. Uh-oh. Okay, still there. So I'm not going to talk much about glacier black bears other than to say they are not very well studied and researched. I spent about half a day trying to find out as much as I can about these glacier bears, and everywhere as I was looking, it kept saying more needs to be studied. So if there's any up and coming biologists that would love to spend a career learning something really cool about black bears, go move to Southeast Alaska and start studying these glacier bears, because there's truly not a lot of information that tells us why they look like they do. There's a few theories here and there. One theory that was thrown out, which I don't, it would be easy to prove if there's genetics testing done, but they said it could have been a combination of a bear hybridizing with a grizzly, but I don't see it that much. But it goes to show there's still a lot of research that needs to be done about these glacier black bears. I think they're absolutely stunning bear. So that's going to lead us to talking about topic tonight. And so if you notice from the map, we just moved down just a hair. We're still on that Pacific coast, but instead of being in southeast Alaska, we are now on the western coast of British Columbia. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next 20 minutes, half hour or so, talking about the bear that's called the Kermode black bear. So it's Ursus americanus kermodii. And so once again, it's still a black bear. So a black bear in the East Coast, West Coast, British Columbia, all the same species, just completely different coloration. What makes these Kermode bears so absolutely amazing, you're going to see lots and lots of pictures of this, but it's also known as the spirit bear, and you'll see why in a second. But before I start showing these amazing pictures of the spirit bear, I want to give you a better look to see where these bears are found, because it's only this one small segment of North America. Now, again, we are on the western coast of British Columbia, so just south of that southernmost point of Alaska. And you'll see, don't pay attention to those yellow dots too much, because the bears are found all over a couple of islands. And so there's three major islands within that inset that you find most of these Kermode or spirit bears. Those islands, they're named Gribble, Princess Royal, and Roderick Island. And that's where pretty much all the Kermode or spirit bears are found in North America. So what's really, really cool is this location that they're at is protected. Canadian government, it's kind of like how in America we declare a national forest. The Canadian government declared the Great Bear Rainforest, which is a pretty large segment that they deemed as a protected area. Now, just because it's protected doesn't mean it's completely hands off. But the cool thing is they have, I'm trying to remember, it's 12,000 square miles that were set aside for this Great Bear Rainforest. And one of the reasons being, they know that this area of the British Columbian province is so crazy unique. Does your screen keep going off? Because my video disappeared for a second. I didn't know if that was a blip on your end too. Okay, good. Hopefully I won't have a power outage that I just heard a little pop and it scared me. So anyway, going back to this Great Bear Rainforest, the Canadian government protected this area, and it's a huge, vast area, 12,000 square miles. I forget the 20. I think it's 21 million acres that is protected, which is just unheard of. So gorgeous, great job by the Canadian government. Yes, they're still going to be doing some logging in those areas, but they have a lot of those areas set aside not to touch, just so they can protect these spirit bears. And just so you know, the spirit bear is recognized as the provincial animal of British Columbia. So let's talk just a second about the Great Bear Rainforest. Has anyone, just curious, has anyone on this webinar ever been to the Great Bear Rainforest? All right, nope, nobody. Well, I personally would love to go because what I'm about to do is show you where these bears exist. I see Christine typing. I'm going to be jealous if you've been there, Christine. So in the meantime, let me show you what this place looks like because this is where we find these Kermode or spirit bears. So here is what the area looks like. Again, this is the western coast of British Columbia, and you could see it's literally a rainforest. In fact, it is a rainforest. It is a temperate rainforest as opposed to a tropical rainforest. So the really, really cool thing about rainforest, and if you notice, you look at it, you see just how incredibly lush it is. Besides the water, besides the trees, you have so much just dense, thick vegetation and foliage that is just an amazing area for biodiversity. So much so that if you look at a rainforest from an ecosystem perspective, and again, I'm going to use that term biodiversity, it is just lights out. And what I mean by that is there are so many different species, from plant species to insects to birds to mammals to anything, and they're so intertwined. This picture alone, I love this picture. And just so you know, this is where I got to give the huge shout out to Ian McAllister because all the photos from here on out are going to be from Ian McAllister at pacificwild.org. But you just see the just insane amount of biodiversity above water and below water. And so it's a really, really healthy ecosystem. And it's, like I said, it's just amazing to see how rich it is with all the different species of critters that are out there. And I can only imagine it's got to be like a wonderland type of play area if you are some type of biologist wanting to study literally any type of relationship that they have out there. So the cool thing when you do have a lot of this biodiversity, there are so many different crazy things to find. So from birds, all right, I'm going to quiz y'all. Does anyone know what kind of birds these are? Oh, very good, Christine. They're puffins. They're tufted puffins to be exact. Just crazy cool looking bird. But just amazing biodiversity. You have a whole slew of eagles. These are all bald eagles. Those other two are not goldens. Those are just immature bald eagles. But this Great Bear Rainforest also has some wolves that live on the coast. It's pretty awesome. Ian McAllister has some amazing wolf pictures. I threw this in there. I wasn't going to throw a picture of a sea otter in there, but I just love the expression on that guy's face. Looks like his teeth are pretty ground down too, as well. But the diversity of birds and mammals are just insane, and they have bears. They've got grizzly bears, or I shouldn't say grizzly bears. My bad, my bad. These are brown bears. Grizzlies are usually interior of North America. Brown bears that are in the interior. So these would be classified as brown bears. But these aren't the bears that you all here came to look at. And so what we're going to do, we're going to talk a little bit about this subspecies of black bears called the spirit bear, or nicknamed the spirit bear. So what I'm about to do is show you what a spirit bear, or what a Kermode black bear looks like. Are you ready? There it is. Now, I did this on purpose to let you know that the vast majority of black bears in this area are going to be black. These Kermode bears, this Ursus americanus kermodii, 90% of them are going to be black. But every once in a while, along comes one of these guys. They just pop out. The mom is pure black. The siblings are pure black. Sometimes mom and dad are pure black. And out comes along the white guy. So the white guy, they're all Kermode, or the subspecies of black bears, but the one that would be nicknamed the spirit bear obviously is going to be the white one. And so one of the things that I enjoy doing is researching some of the legend and lore of the spirit bear. And I won't take too long on this, but I love the story that the Native Americans that lived in that area for thousands of years had a story, exactly knew why those spirit bears existed on that island. And in their culture, they believed that the raven was the great creator. And he created a lot of the wildlife that exists in that area after a long time of winter and cold and freezing desolation. And he created life for everybody. And it was good. And he liked what he had created. But then he ended up making a deal with the black bear because he wanted to remind people of where they once came from, this cold and frozen time before everything existed. And so he asked the black bear if one out of every 10 of the bears that were born would be born white, just to remind everyone of where they once came from. So that cold, desolate place. And so these spirit bears is kind of a reminder from their great, the raven, the great spirit of a time before when things were all good like they are now. So I thought that was a really, really cool story about the spirit bear. So the one thing I want you to understand is although they are white, they are not considered albinos. Albino animals have this complete lack of pigmentation. Their body cannot produce it. So typically, when one of the differentiating characteristics of an albino is if you look at an albino's eyes, they're going to be pretty pink. Now, these aren't the greatest. The nose is usually pink here too. The bear on the right, you can tell, is not albino. I'm looking at the bear on the left. I'm like, wow, that nose is pretty pink or not very colored. But I think you'll see why you see a lot of the red. You can see some of the red on the fur, and you'll see in a little bit. But the main thing I want you to understand here is these bears are not albinos, simply a recessive gene. Now, if you go back to high school, and oh my gosh, I hated genetics, but I do remember a little bit. And so when you have these dominant and recessive genes, which is what this white coloration is, if you have both dominant genes, you're going to be black. If you have a dominant and a recessive gene, you could be either or. If you have both recessive genes, then you'll be white. And so there's so many different combinations of these dominant recessive genes. But this is why you could have two completely black, beautiful, straight jet black bears give birth to a completely white bear. It's simply a recessive gene that is born out through the genetics. Just a few pictures to show, again, a huge thank you to Ian for providing all these photos of these spirit bears. They're just a wonderful, wonderful creature to see how they could be so, so different in coloration from their parent. And you can see, again, in the background how lush this Great Bear rainforest is. It truly is like a tropical rainforest. It's a temperate rainforest, but it's just incredibly lush where these bears live. Now, I did want to teach you something, which every one of our Wildlife for You webinars, we're trying to teach more and more about the wildlife that interests us. And so one of the coolest things I found when researching the spirit bears is you look at their diet. Now, everyone knows I talk about black bears all the time. Black bears are not carnivores. They're not herbivores. They're classified as omnivores. And so they're eating a lot of everything. So from vegetation to whatever small mammals they could find. As with most black bears, the main part of their diet is usually vegetation. And that's how it is all along the East Coast, even the West Coast, or the western half of the United States. Black bears primarily are eating vegetation, so berries, nuts, grasses, anything that grows out of the ground that's edible, the bears are going to be eating it. They then supplement their diet with whatever meat products they could find. So they scavenge a lot of stuff. If they stumble upon a live animal, yes, they will kill a fawn, they will kill a bird, they will kill whatever they can catch. But I like to call bears somewhat lazy. So they don't wake up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm in the mood to eat a deer today, and they go hunting for a deer. They don't do that. They wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to eat the first thing I can find. And guess what that usually is? It's some type of vegetation. So, spirit bears are very, very much like black bears all over the rest of North America. And so they eat a lot of vegetable matter. And you can see, I wish I knew what kind of berries these were, but I just absolutely love these photos of these spirit bear, of this particular spirit bear eating the berries. And you can see exactly how much he loves these berries. And so it's amazing how nimble and delicate a bear can be. And this is firsthand knowledge I have when I was working at the Bear Center. And we would feed the bears sometimes hickory nuts or some other nut that they would have to shell. Acorn, they'll usually pop the whole thing and eat the whole thing. But any of these hickory nuts or any other nuts that are particularly hard shell covering, even a walnut, I would watch the bears crack them open and gently eat out the meaty nut material on the inside. So they're extremely nimble with the way they can feed. And you can see this bear was definitely focusing in on that particular berry. The reason I zoomed in, I think gives you a good indication. They're not albino. Even the nose is a little off color. It's not like jet black, but it's not pink. But you can definitely see in the eyes, they have dark eyes like every other black bear has dark eyes. So what makes Coyote bears a little bit different than most bears, especially on the East Coast. Now, out west, some of the western black bears will eat like the Kermode or the spirit bears. But what makes them different, and I'm going to quiz you here, what food source that's the Pacific Northwest that is in abundant supply? Can anyone get, oh, geez, you're already typing it in. So you guys are spot on. So think about where they live, that Pacific Northwest, that rainforest, lots of streams, lots of fresh flowing water. So they get these huge runs of fish. And I'm going to use a fancy biological term because I like throwing a nerd term out at least once every presentation. And so these fish are called anadromous. In fact, let me type it. They're called anadromous fish. I think I spelled it right. Literally what that means is an anadromous fish is like a salmon, where they're born in freshwater. As they mature from eggs to those fry, they migrate out to the ocean, into the salt water. They spend most of their life and the years, depending on the species of fish. And then when they come back in to spawn into freshwater, they'll go up these streams to spawn where they were once born from. And so those types of fish are called anadromous fish. And they create these huge, huge runs of fish in a lot of these western coastal waters. And so this is what the brown bears, the Alaskan brown bears are eating. And because these black bears live in that same environment, they get to take advantage of these fish runs. And so black bears in this Great Bear rainforest absolutely love feeding on fish. So they're one of the black bears that definitely has more of a carnivorous shift in their diet, because when these salmon runs occur, there's just ample food everywhere for the taking. All they have to do is wade up one of these streams and catch these lunker of a fish coming upstream to spawn. And so they have the benefit, unlike most bears on the East Coast and as well as most bears on the West Coast, that don't have these amazing salmon runs coming up each and every stream. So The bears that live on those islands, the black bears, definitely love eating this kind of fish, or love eating fish. And spirit bears are no different. They're just like their black counterparts. They will feed on the fish just as much as any other bear. And remember that first slide I showed you where he had red all around his mouth? I think you could figure out where a lot of that red came from. I think that's a picture of that bear earlier posed. But the cool thing with spirit bears is a big part of their diet, especially early fall when those fish are spawning, is going to be from these salmon runs. Katie, I see that you raised your hand. Do you have a question? And just so you know, one of the biggest ecological, I don't want to say disaster, it's one of the biggest ecological impacts that we have on the West Coast are these hydrologic dams that prevent many of these anadromous fish from moving upstream because you think that you're only impacting those species of fish that can't get past the dam, but you impact every animal that feeds on those fish. And there were lots of different critters that will feed on those fish. So it has major ecological impacts when these hydroelectric dams went in the western part of North America. Katie, that is an awesome question, and I was praying that no one would ask that. Here's the reason why. Whenever I talk about brown bears, I will talk about a brown bear is a brown bear is a brown bear. Now, the interior brown bears, what we call grizzlies around the Yellowstone area, they tend to be smaller, usually anywhere from 400 to 600, sometimes 800 pounds, because most of their diet is the vegetable crop. So the berries, the nuts, and a little bit of meat that they find. Now their cousins, the brown bears that are on the coast, those Alaskan brown bears, grow huge because they're feeding on these fish that come upstream. And so those brown bears, even though they're the same kind of bears as the grizzlies, they grow to be anywhere from 800 to 1,200, sometimes 1,500 pounds because of this abundance of fish that comes in that they're able to feed on. And so immediately I saw all these pictures from Ian that were showing all these spirit bears or these Kermode black bears feeding on fish. So my initial thought was just like yours. I was like, all right, these black bears have to be some of the bigger black bears in North America. And the more and more I read, it said the average size for these spirit bears will be that 200 to 300, sometimes 400 pounds, pretty much the same size as bears all over North America, black bears all over North America. So it surprised me. I wish I knew why they didn't grow as big. I do have a little bit of a theory, but they don't appear to be that much larger than any of their other counterparts. And it could be, and this is just a guess, don't write this down as gospel, but my idea is because they may be in hibernation longer, they just don't, they're not feeding all throughout the year for them to grow to tremendous size. But that doesn't make sense either because the brown bears don't hold by that rule. So, Katie, I wish I had a good answer for you why they don't grow larger, but I can tell you they don't appear to be any larger than their other North American cousins. So, awesome question. I wish you didn't put me on the spot, but you did, but that's okay. Yeah, they're typical size of a regular old black bear that you see. So you can see here, obviously, these bears on the coast of British Columbia love fishing, and this is a huge part of their diet when those salmon runs come in. I love this because it looks like mom's two cubs, the spirit bear and her other black offspring, are pretty jealous of mom's fishing spot, and it looks like mom's about to get pounced on right there. Here's what I thought was fascinating. I think this is probably going to be the most interesting thing you learn from tonight's presentation. We're going to talk about two bears fishing. So, say you have two bears. They're both black bears. They're both Kermode bears. One is this white spirit bear, and its sibling is just plain old black coloration. So, you're fishing for this guy right here. Which one do you think would be more successful at fishing, the black bear or the white bear? And why? Now, we touched on this. I won't tell you which. Well, it was a webinar regarding camouflage, and it makes total sense. It's one of those things. The more you learn, things start clicking. Say, "Oh, I get it," which is really cool. All right, 2 out of 3 are right. Lori, I hate to break the bad news. The spirit bear, or the white bear, tends to be a much better fisherman than if the bear has a straight black coat. Reason being, remember, bears usually find food with their sense of smell, but they're not smelling the fish. They're fishing using their visual cues, so they're looking for the fish. So obviously, bears don't have tremendous eyesight, so they do most of the fishing during the day. So it's light outside. So these fish are coming upstream, and if you're a fish looking upward, this is about the best picture I could find. But if you're a fish coming upward and you're looking up at a bright sky, and so it doesn't mean the sun is out, but even when there's clouds out there, the sky is really bright. What are you likely to see easier, the black color or the white color? So I think the black, when you're looking up, if there's a black body over you, you tend to pick it out much easier and you will skirt off to the side. Whereas these white bears, when the fish is looking up, that white kind of blends in with the sky above. In studies, they actually studied this. The white bears, the spirit bears, tend to be catch 35% more fish. They had a number, 35% more fish than their black counterparts. So they are much better fishermen. And so this is one thing that's really, really interesting to think about, because if you think about evolution, certain genes are selected for. Survival of the fittest doesn't mean it's the biggest, it's the baddest, it's the meanest. Survival of the fittest means whatever animal is able to survive and reproduce and produce more offspring. And so obviously being able to survive means being able to feed yourself. So it's one of those things that I wish we had a magic ball to look into, a crystal ball to look into, to see thousands of years from now which would be a more dominant bear, provided humans don't screw up the earth. But I personally think that Kermode bear over time would become more and more and more prevalent in this particular environment where they're feeding on fish. So, all right, that's the only thing I can teach you. You all know everything else there is to know about black bears. So when it comes to fishing, the spirit bear is hands down the best of all the black bears when it comes to fishing. And it's because of that white coat. It allows them to blend in and the fish can't see them as easily. Trish, you are awesome. Trish nailed it, the counter shading. It's just a way of camouflaging. So when an animal looks up or down at you, you blend in better. But that was taught in that camouflage class that we taught a few months ago. So I've got a ton more pictures of spirit bears, but what I'm going to try to do, just bear with me, hopefully I won't lose anybody. Like I raved about, Ian McAllister has just done some amazing photography and cinema photography. And he created, if you ever heard of the IMAX movie, The Great Bear Rainforest, let's see if this will play. He was one of the impetus for getting this. So hopefully you'll be able to watch this. It's only about a 2-minute trailer. But if you all get a chance to see this in IMAX theaters, I highly, highly
A
recommend it.
sanctuary
And I'll keep
to a
quiet for a
stunning
second.
diversity of wildlife. And one very special member of the bear family. A spirit bear, the rarest bear in the world. Join us on an adventure to one of the wildest places on Earth. See what the new generation of First Nations stewards are doing to help protect the natural balance.
Is that the cub? Oh, so cute.
Take a remarkable journey into one of the most awe-inspiring landscapes on the planet. And find out what it means to be truly wild. Great Bear Rainforest, a film for IMAX and giant screen theaters.
Is that the cub? Cute.
Take a remarkable journey into one of the most awe-inspiring landscapes on the planet. Find out what it means to be truly wild. Great Bear Rainforest, a film for IMAX and giant screen theaters.
All right, who else besides me would love to go there? I never knew so much about the that Great Bear Rainforest that I would die to go there. That looks like an absolutely amazing place. Okay. Okay, let me get a few questions, then I'll show you some amazing pictures that Ian sent me. But Katie said, I sent you a picture of a brindle fur pattern a few weeks ago. I couldn't find the photo credit, though. That was listed. Have you ever seen that brindle pattern before? I have not, and I'm having a hard time picturing the exact photo. I think I know what you're talking about, but I couldn't tell you if that was photoshopped. Now you will see, in fact, when I click through some of these pictures, there are some bears that are very white. Not so much polar bear white. Polar bear white is almost translucent. These bears are more of cream colored in many situations. In fact, the picture you're seeing here. Oops. They're such a cool animal. If you would see that for the first time, put it this way: if I saw that in camp, my first thought would be if I saw a cub like this, would be an albino raccoon. And so I think they're just absolutely fascinating animals. But like I said, I couldn't be more thankful for these wildlife photographers that just capture some amazing photographs, and because we're trying to teach the public, they're usually very protective of the photos they take, but they have been so welcoming to Wildlife for You because we're trying to teach people about the animals we all love. I love this photo. The reason I put it back in here is to remind me because I told you that when the two bears are fishing together, you have the black bear and the white bear. The white bear ends up catching a whole lot more fish than the black bear. But the thing that I love the most is the spirit bear was always very supportive of his sibling, and I don't know if it'll help him out or share any of his food, but I thought that was a pretty cool picture of the arm around the other. So yeah, I think it's just amazing that you could have have these two same mammals that just have completely opposite coloration. So if there's a yin and yang in the natural world, I think you're looking at it right there. Okay, Trish asked a question. By all means, if anyone else has other questions, now's the time to start typing them in. But Trish asked, are spirit bears born with the creamy white color? Also, is the color an advantage for the predators that may share the forest? Yes, they're born with that color. So when they're coming out of the den, when they're pretty small, they already have that white pelage. Pelage is just another fancy name for the fur. So they start very young with that color fur. I don't know the progression if it gets whiter or creamier, but it's pretty much the color fur they have at birth. Now, when it comes to the predators, typically black bears, there's only one thing that will well, I shouldn't say one thing. There's only one animal that an adult black bear has to worry about. They typically don't have to worry about wolves or cougars. They can handle themselves when they're an adult. The only other animal that could push them out of an area or pose a potential threat would be a brown bear, because they are just much, much larger. And I mention this in my classes all the time because a lot of people are always asking me, oh, what would win in a fight, a cougar or a wolf, or a brown bear or this? Or these apex predators, these kind of like dominant predators, they don't like fighting each other. If there is a risk that you yourself could get injured or maimed, there's a good chance you're going to die. So these larger predators, these apex predators, don't duke it out just for the fun of it. The only time you have conflict between these different species is typically if there is a food shortage, and food is extremely, extremely scarce. So think about being in a rainforest. Rarely ever do you have a food shortage. You might have food shortage in the Southwest, in the desert, or if there's a drought in an area. But in the rainforest, there's so much abundant plant life and marine life that food is rarely a scarcity. And so there's not going to be much conflict. And this is why you so often see those videos of these incredible rivers with all these fish floating up, and there's 20 or 30 bears all fishing in the same spot. There's so much food to go around that they don't have to fight each other. And so you're not going to get a lot of conflict when you're an adult spirit bear. Now, I will tell you, black bears of all age classes, well, of all over North America, when they're young, when they're cubs, when they're less than a year old or even a year old, they're not the biggest of bears. And so they can definitely get their butt kicked by other predators. Wolves can come in, cougars, they can all take young black bears. But once that black bear gets some age on him, he really doesn't have too much to worry about. He's king of the hill in much of the forest. Does anyone else have any other questions about spirit bears? Got a few more photos. Oh, I think I showed you that one already. Just a truly beautiful animal. Huge shout out to Ian McAllister. I'm going to end it here to show you whatever berries these are that the spirit bear was eating. They got to be gosh darn pretty good, because even the big old brown bear will resort to eating the same old berries. And so Ian took all these photos, just an amazing photographer, and so thankful he shared all these photos with us today. Lori, I'm actually clearing up. You should have heard me. Well, I couldn't even breathe through my nose Sunday through all the way up to yesterday or last night. So I'm going to end it there. But again, I want you to keep asking questions if you have questions, but you can also keep watching. Huge shout out again to Ian McAllister. If you want to look up some of the work that they've done besides that Great Bear Rainforest, visit that pacificwild.org. Earlier on in the slideshow, I used photos from Bob Howdeshell, Darwin White, Ashley Haskett, and Rita Russell. I am so indebted because without these amazing photos, you would be bored out of your skull just listening to me ramble on. Y'all know how to follow along. We have the website to register for classes. Again, I'm going to beg and plead that you leave comments or rate us on our Facebook page. Trish Stevens does an absolutely amazing job keeping up with our Twitter posts. But here, I need you to mark your calendars. Two things. I know I hooked on to at least one of you here. First off, the next webinar put up in 2 weeks. And this was by request from the students. They wanted to hear about some of the success stories of some of the wildlife success stories in North America. And the two species that were mentioned the most were eagles and otters. So we're going to do just an hour-long class. Half the class we're going to be talking about the success story of bald eagles, and then the other half we're going to be talking about otters. The cool thing, at least from my standpoint, is you don't have to listen to me drone on all the time. Robert Brewer was a big part of otter restoration back in the East, and so Robert will be joining me. Many of you know Robert from the SWAP program. He's my counterpart in Tennessee for that. I realized I never turned my camera back on. But that's going to be Thursday, February 20th. If you want to join in, we're going to be talking about how the wildlife agencies all across North America restored bald eagles and otters to our landscape. So join us for that. But the other thing that I'm super duper proud of and excited about is this Green Fire Tour. Now, if you like wildlife classes sitting in front of you, watching them on a computer, imagine doing it in real life. So September 6th to 13th, I'm doing a week-long adventure for whoever wants to do it. I only have probably one room available, so it could be one person with that room, or if you want to share it with someone close to you, you can greatly reduce your cost. But I'm doing this Green Fire Tour, northern New Mexico. We're going to travel all over northern New Mexico. We're going to rent an amazing house in the Santa Fe area. That's going to be our home base. But each and every day we're going to get up, we're going to see amazing sights, we're going to learn about wildlife, hopefully see a ton of wildlife, from bighorn sheep to elk to all kinds of birds and lizards and you name it. The scenery in northern New Mexico, I brag about it all the time, it is to die for. It is unlike any other part of the world because you can go from alpine tundra to a site like this. It looks like you're in Middle Earth in some kind of Lord of the Rings type of scenario. It's absolutely fantastic. This is one of the hikes we're going to do, but it's also just absolutely gorgeous Rocky Mountains. And so think about joining us on that Green Fire Tour. If you're interested, shoot me an email or a text and I can give you all the more information. I'm still looking to book at least one more room, so that's what we have available right now. So with that, I'm going to it on here and I will answer whatever questions you have. So let me put my old man glasses on. And I'm going to pause this so I don't make a fool of myself. Christina, I'd love to do that Maple Leaf tour. About 4,000. The cool thing is my Green Fire Tour around northern New Mexico will be only about 30% of that cost. It'll only be about $1,500 if you find a roommate. So that would be absolutely amazing. I think it'd be fantastic to see that area. Angela, I'm looking forward to that Smokies class too. I'm going to have a ton to talk about. I'm going to see if Kim Delozier wants to join me in on that with me. He is probably the most knowledgeable about bears and the Smokies. Well, I'm glad you liked it. I was a little worried because I didn't have much new information to teach you because you all know everything there is to know about black bears. But hopefully I found that one tidbit of information about how they're much better, the spirit bears are much better fishermen than their black counterparts. Well, you guys were awesome. Thank you so very much for joining in tonight. And with that, I'm going to bid you a wonderful night. I am well